young adults and teens are on the rise. Researchers analyzed drug use and health data for teens and young adults and found that episodes of depression increased in adolescents from nearly 9% in 2005 to just over 11% in 2014.
So the World Health Organization has announced that depression is now the world's #1 illness and disability worldwide. And in the last decade alone, they've seen numbers rise more than 18% in just the last 10 years.
According to the WHO, India and China and the U.S. are also the countries most affected, like you said, by anxiety, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder.
According to multiple studies, we are the most depressed generation ever.
A startling new report from the Centers for Disease Control. Researchers say teenage suicide is growing at an alarming rate. Since the year 2000, the suicide rate for teens is up 28%, with a startling average of 5 deaths a day.
When the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan began to heat up after 2004, the American public and the military were shocked to see that the number of soldiers killing themselves began to rise sharply.
Psychology Today reports that the suicide rate amongst young adults has tripled since the 1950s, and terrifyingly, suicide is now the second most common cause of death amongst college students.
We got word this morning of the suicide death of Anthony Bourdain, the chef and TV personality. Of course, earlier this week, there was word of the death of Kate Spade, and that has put the spotlight on suicide rates, especially high among a certain demographic.
The rate of suicide among middle-aged American adults went up by 19% from 1999 to 2016. It was part of a trend that saw suicide rates increase in nearly every American state. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention said in 2015, more than half of the suicides in 27 states were among people with no known mental health condition. The CDC says that group was more likely to die by firearm than those with known mental health conditions.
By 2009, the numbers had more than doubled to well over 20 per 100,000. Since that time, with the exception of a spike in 2012, that rate has remained fairly steady.
How can this be in the most powerful and richest nation the world has ever seen?
Your host, David Wilcock. We're here with Corey Good, and in this episode, we are going to explore various aspects of a highly controversial topic, one that may be unsettling to you, the voice of God. And as we've been sitting here meditating, getting ready to do this, I've been thinking about both the historic aspect of how some of these things have been done, and then we're also going to tie in some very strange modern technology as well. So this is going to be controversial. It may be upsetting.
You're dealing with an addicted generation.
This is a big time bomb ticking.
This is no accident. Indeed, it is by design.
I mean, seriously?
It was my mistake.
I mean, I think we can all feel it.
To try to make these products as addictive as possible.
Spike in dopamine.
We now know that many of the major social media companies hire individuals called attention engineers who borrow principles from Las Vegas casino gambling, among other places, to try to make these products as addictive as possible. That is the desired use case of these products, is that you use it in an addictive fashion because that maximizes the profit that can be extracted from your attention and data.
It literally is a point now where I think we have created tools that are ripping apart the social fabric of how society works. That is truly where we are.
The way the technologist Jaron Lanier puts it is that these companies offer you shiny treats in exchange for minutes of your attention and bytes of your personal data, which can then be packaged up and sold.
What happened is that the attention economy and this race for attention got more and more competitive. And the more competitive it got to get people's attention on, say, a news website, the more they need to add these design principles, these more manipulative design tactics, as ways of holding on to your attention.
You don't realize it, but you are being programmed.
Social media tools are designed to be addictive. The actual desired use case of these tools is that you fragment your attention as much as possible throughout your waking hours. That's how these tools are designed to use. Well, we have a growing amount of research which tells us that if you spend large portions of your day in a state of fragmented attention, so large portions of your day where you're constantly breaking up your attention, take a quick glance, do a just check, and just quickly look at Instagram, that this can permanently reduce your capacity for concentration. I am especially worried about this when we look at the younger generation coming up, which is the most saturated in this technology.
And it's very addictive because if you pull on the slot machine arm enough, you will win. And you never know which pull will reward you.
The future is one of social engineering. Well, the present is also a product of social engineering, and much of the past has been shaped by the efforts of social engineers. Ever since the beginnings of true mass media, through television, film, radio, and now the internet, there has been efforts to socially reshape the masses. This is the new science of propaganda. No longer are we influenced mostly by speeches and posters. Instead, we are shaped by the media we consume, primarily. The news media plays a large part in this, alongside Hollywood and television. Music also shapes our views and opinions, as another example. At large, art influences our culture to a great degree because we spend most of our time indulging in these modern forms of art. One may say that art actually reflects society's values and cultures, and I would in some ways agree. On the other hand, it is used to shift the Overton window, to introduce ideas, and to instigate.
Well, one thing we don't talk about is that it's sort of hard to talk about this. Our minds have these kinds of backdoors. There's kind of, if you're human and you wake up and you open your eyes, there is a certain set of dimensions to your experience that can be manipulated. When I was a kid, I was a magician, and you learn all about these limits, you know, that short-term memory is about this long, and there's different reaction times, and if you ask people certain questions in certain ways, you can control the answer. And this is just the structure of being human. To be human means that you are persuadable in every single moment. I mean, the thing about magic, as an example, is that magic works on everybody. Sleight of hand, right? It doesn't matter what language you speak, it doesn't matter how intelligent you are, it's not about what someone knows, it's about how your mind actually works. So knowing this, it turns out that there's this whole playbook of persuasive techniques that actually I learned when I was at the Stanford Persuasive Technology Lab, and that most people in Silicon Valley in the tech industry learned as ways of getting your attention. So one example is we are all vulnerable to social approval. We really care what other people think of us. So for example, you know, when you upload a new photo, a new profile photo of yourself on Facebook, that's a moment where our mind is very vulnerable to knowing what other people think of my new profile photo. And so when we get new likes on our profile photo, Facebook, knowing this, could actually message me and say, oh, you have new likes on your profile photo. And it knows that we'll be vulnerable to that moment because we all really care about when we're tagged in a photo or when we have a new profile photo. And the thing is that they control the dial, the technology companies control the dial for when and how long your profile photo shows up on other people's news feeds. So they can orchestrate it so that other people more often end up liking your profile photo over a delayed period of time, for example, so that you end up having to more frequently come back and see what the new likes are, right? And the problem is that they don't do this because they're evil. They do it because, again, they're in this race for our attention. And we should also ask, is that necessarily such a bad thing if they're orchestrating it so that other people like my photo? I mean, that might feel good to me. But so we have to have a new conversation about, as these technology companies use these techniques, these vulnerabilities in our minds, when is that actually aligned and good for us? When is that ethical? When is that honest? When is that fair? And when is that dishonest and unfair? Because they're actually manipulating our minds in a way that doesn't add up to our spending our time well on the screen. Well, so another vulnerability in our mind is something called a variable schedule reward. And that's like a slot machine in Las Vegas. It turns out that slot machines make more money in the United States than baseball, movies, and theme parks combined. People become addicted to slot machines. I think it's 2 to 3 times faster than any other kind of gambling in a casino. So it's insane. And why is that? Because it's very simple. You just pull a lever, and sometimes you get a reward, you know, and sometimes you don't. And the more random it is, and the more variable it is, the more addictive it becomes. And the thing is that that turns our phone into a slot machine, because every time we check our phone, we're playing the slot machine to see, what did I get, right? Every time that we check our email, we're playing the slot machine to see, what did I get? Did I get invited to an interview at BigThink, or did I just get another newsletter, right? Or if you're on a dating site like Tinder, And when you're swiping, each swipe is you're playing the slot machine to see, did I get a match? I'm playing the slot machine to see, did I get a match? And the problem is that this dynamic, these variable schedule rewards, or the slot machine mechanic, is so powerful that it's the best thing at addicting people and putting you in the zone. So how much on our phones, when we use our technology, Instagram is like a slot machine. What's going to come next on the feed? You know, Snapchat is a slot machine. Each time you see the red notifications, and you don't know what's behind it, you're playing the slot machine when you click on it to see, what did I get, right? And so it's sprinkled all throughout these products because it's a very compelling way of getting people's attention.
I'm very close to the cutting edge in AI, and it scares the hell out of me. It's capable of vastly more than almost anyone knows, and the rate of improvement is exponential. You can see this in things like AlphaGo, which went from, in the span of maybe 6 to 9 months, it went from being unable to beat even a reasonably good Go player to then beating the European world champion, who was ranked 600, then beating Lee Sedol 4-5, who had been world champion for many years, then beating the current world champion, then beating everyone while playing simultaneously. Then there was AlphaZero, which crushed AlphaGo 100-0. And AlphaZero just learned by playing itself, and it can play basically any game that you put the rules in for. Whatever rules you give it literally read the rules, play the game, and be superhuman for any game.
You said that artificial intelligence is the fundamental existential risk facing civilization. Did I get that close enough?
In my opinion, it is the biggest risk that we face as a civilization is artificial intelligence.
And so, to a group of leaders, what would you advise that how should we be addressing something that's such a large landscape and yet obviously so important?
I think that one of the roles of government is to ensure the public good, and to that dangers to the public are addressed. So that hence the regulatory thing. I think the first order of business would be to try to learn as much as possible. To understand the nature of the issues, to look closely at the progress that is being made, and the remarkable achievements of artificial intelligence. I think the robotics, you can see robots that can learn to walk from nothing, within hours, like way faster than any biological being. That's most dangerous is, and it's the hardest to kind of wrap, kind of get your arms around because it's not a physical thing, is kind of a deep intelligence in the network. You say, well, what harm could a deep intelligence in the network do? So, well, it could start a war by doing fake news and spoofing email accounts and fake press releases, and just by manipulating information.
Is developing AI safely. This is extremely important. I think the danger of AI is much greater than the danger of nuclear warheads by a lot. And nobody would suggest that we allow anyone to just build nuclear warheads if they want. That would be insane. And mark my words, AI is far more dangerous than nukes. Far. So why do we have no regulatory oversight? This is insane.
Well, it's a question you've been asking for a long time. I think it's a question that's come to the forefront over the last year, where you begin to realize that it doesn't necessarily, I think we've all been focused in on the idea of artificial superintelligence, right? Which is clearly a danger, but maybe, a little further out. What's happened over the last year is you've seen what I've been calling artificial stupidity. You're talking about, algorithmic manipulation of social media. Like we're in it now. It's starting to happen.
In the 1950s, the CIA started to conduct mind control experiments. These experiments were not abstract think tanks, but intensive human experimentation. The code given to these experiments was MK Ultra. MK Ultra combined several government projects, such as Project Chatter bluebird, and artichoke. Chanta had been testing drugs during interrogations.